The great Gore Vidal said that he wasn't a conspiracy theorist, he was a conspiracy analyst. And he said that a conspiracy theory today is really a code word for the unspoken truth.
The race to 5G is a race America must win, and it's a race that we will win. By next year, the United States is on pace to have more 5G spectrum than any other country in the world. That's a big statement because, as you know, some people got ahead of us. We should have been doing this a long time ago. But we must not rest. The race is far from over. American companies must lead the world in cellular technology. 5G networks must be secure. They must be strong. They have to be guarded from the enemy. We do have enemies out there, and they will be. They must also cover every community, and they must be deployed as soon as possible.
The greatest travesty in American civil rights history is happening right under our nose every day, and people don't even know it exists. And by the time they do, it will be too late. It's two things. Consists of two things. They've been involved in the training, research, and development of it to fully implement it. And the government, who is first in the world to do so, to fully implement and deploy this technology, will have an incomparable advantage over every other government on earth. So basically what you have is an arms race.
The race for the world's fastest supercomputer is on. Summit is the first supercomputer designed for artificial intelligence applications, and researchers plan to use Summit for AI projects that could identify genetic predispositions to cancer or opioid addiction. By surpassing China, the U.S. has escalated the tech rivalry between the two countries.
There's no question the race is on. But this is not the space race. This is the race to knowledge.
Faster supercomputers are already on the horizon. The European Union, Japan, and China are all developing machines they say will outperform Summit. The next big frontier is exascale computing. That is, computers that can perform 1 billion times 1 billion calculations per second.
The use of this machine is only going to be limited by the imagination.
Targeted individuals have their minds linked to artificial intelligence through a brain-to-computer interface. Telecommunication and nanotechnology is used to create a bidirectional connection between a supercomputer and the human brain.
Remote neural monitoring is actually an actual military defense system using satellite tower-based platforms, mobile-based platforms, by way of they're basically relay devices. These tower satellites and mobile platforms are relay devices. These by electro-optics, virtual interfaces, and so forth, brain-to-computer interface, electronic brain-to-brain interface. This is how the technology is designed to work, and they utilize microwaves. It's easier to understand if you think of laser imaging and tracking, okay? Those type of systems. Basically, they're using, remote neural monitoring is designed to image and measure and transmit brain and neural activity.
Exciting one that has been ongoing since about 1994 has been a project that has been utilizing increased databasing to be able to assemble these types of images and correlate them back to what the individual was either looking at, hearing, touching, or in some cases experiencing and thinking, and then trying to match the image through data analysis, which is called a correlational match and fit, to these types of thoughts. They're going one step further, and they're actually doing what's called a spectral analysis of what's showing up here, particularly in the visual cortex, to try to recreate the image with fidelity of what this individual was looking at. And they're making some good progress.
Let's imagine that we could take our brain out of our body and keep it alive in a glass box. Then let's get a computer filled with information related to a particular setting, such as image, sound, and smell. We'll connect this computer to the brain with electrodes and send the pre-recorded data to the brain. As our brain receives these signals, it will see and live the setting that the computer is transmitting. We could also send signals to the brain from this computer about our own image. For example, we could send the electrical information, such as the sight, hearing, and touch, that we would experience while sitting at a desk. Our brain would perceive that we were a businessman sitting in his office. This imaginary world would continue as long as the information kept coming from the computer, and we would never realize that we were actually a brain sitting in a glass box.
The cognitive state of a targeted individual is continuously recorded and manipulated. Every feeling, emotion, or perception has a different firing pattern in the brain. The data is used to create a map of the human consciousness. These neuronal signals can then be reintroduced back into the brain to create a virtual environment and a state of conscious awareness that only the targeted individual can perceive. A virtual world is superimposed over the real world. Sights and sounds are artificially induced, voices are artificially created, synthetic feelings and emotions are manufactured. Thoughts and ideas are manipulated. Anything that a person can imagine, think, feel, or experience can be recreated in the mind.
And so once you have connected the targeted individual with the frequency and they resonate together, then you have a perfect avenue upon which to send and receive information back and forth. And that's exactly how they manipulate someone's thoughts. They send voices into someone's head. They manipulate their emotions. They manipulate their behavior. And then that's also how they receive back from the individual in real time the vital signs, the emotions, the thoughts, what the person's seeing, what the person's hearing. And then all that information, of course, is rendered on a computer elsewhere via software, and it can be monitored and tracked in real time. It can literally stop your own thoughts from happening and replace them with other thoughts by sending thoughts to your head. And it's so sophisticated that you cannot tell where these thoughts are coming from. There's no way to discern that they are coming from somewhere other than your own mind. So you can imagine how bad this would be for people that don't even realize this technology exists, and they're having these thoughts which they think are spontaneous because being under the influence of this technology now, kind of having been on both sides of it, I am just amazed at the way it works, and I know that the thoughts that they beam into your head originate from the exact same place in your mind that your own natural thoughts originate from. So if I didn't know I was under the influence of this technology, then I would have no idea that anyone was influencing my thoughts at all. And that's exactly what it can be used for. It can be used to sway people in terms of their opinion, to make them go along with a certain agenda. It can be used to turn groups of people or individuals against each other for whatever purpose.
I'm a former naval officer. I'm a graduate of the United States Naval Academy. I have a degree in control systems engineering. I worked as a surface warfare officer in electronics warfare and nuclear engineering jobs. While I was in the service, I found out there's an ongoing, non-consensual human experiment, and it's testing a human-machine interface weapon.
Now, did you stumble upon this? Were you privy to it?
Yeah, it was an issue where I think it was the next level up in the chain of command. You know, there's 3 or 4 jobs you could take. There was a couple of them where you might be read into this program. Mm-hmm. And so we've got this issue here where we have a non-consensual experiment with a group of American citizens, and these some former military, but a lot of just unsuspecting citizens. It's a group of people here in the United States. They're calling themselves targeted individuals, and it's people from all walks of life, and a lot of it's people who can't fight back.
EEG has been around for a fairly long time. These measures tend to be pretty crude, at least they used to be. Now, they've increased quite a bit in their sophistication, primarily through 3 means. Number 1, They use a high number of actual sensors that have a much greater fidelity and specificity. Number two, they're able to translate that program into a high computational program. And number three, they will also couple this to a magnetic field to be able to then create something called magnetoencephalography, which creates a much more accurate representation of the whole network activity of these clumps of cells that may be firing both in unison and out of sync. So what we're able to do is when we pair this with these imaging types, we get a pretty nice picture of structure and structural related activity and function. Although the big limitation here with both quantitative encephalography and magnetoencephalography is that it's pretty much limited to most of the superficial layers of the brain. It really is a measure of what the top layers are doing, although increasingly what we're trying to do is to drill down a little bit, if you will, and I mean that literally, through the use of indwelling brain implants and or some of the use of our nanotechnology sensor capability to be able to then lower the specificity of the signal so that now we're getting a much higher registry in deeper brain levels. That's still a fairly new technology. But one of the things we can do really nicely with that is we can also use a computational program to map this onto a 3D representation, again this is called a tessellated image, of different patterns of EEG activity that we then co-map with either MRI, fMRI, or in some cases a combination of MRI and diffuser tension imaging. And that gives you this very, very nice structural, functional, what's called analog representation that provides different types of activities with a high level of functional specificity and temporal specificity through EEG, a nice tight time signal that compensates in some ways for the lower signal we get with this stuff, and this stuff. So, take-home message. What do I do with neuroimaging? I compensate for its flaws and I attempt to delimit its insufficiencies by coupling more than one of these neuroimaging potentials together, or techniques together. And I utilize a program of co-registration that combines more than one of these together with various forms of physiologic imaging such as this that can be depicted this way, and I get a pretty nice set of images that can show structure and what structures are engaged in particular activities, behaviors, and cognitions, and patterns of electrophysiological activity.
The nanotechnology and the biotechnology filters down from the hydrosphere into the water supply and the food chain, and now every American, all 318 million Americans are infected. Once the
excuse me again, Brian, and I'll shut up. They're not just infected; they're infested. And when you people think about, well, I'm not going to get chipped, you're already chipped.
But if anyone tells you that they know the details of what 5G is going to become, run the other way. If something can be connected, it will be connected. Hundreds of billions of microchips connected in products from pill bottles to plant waterers. We must reject the notion that the 5G future will be the sole provenance of urban areas. The 5G revolution will touch all corners of our country.
This powder-sized chip, and that's a salt crystal, so this is a small thing, is something called the Mu chip from Hitachi. It's the smallest commercially available RFID system in the world, and can be pulse-powered by radio waves. It doesn't require a battery. You can literally scatter this stuff like dust, or embed this into a sheet of paper. And you know what the really interesting thing about this technology is? This was commercially released 10 years ago. So, the inevitability of smart dust. So what is smart dust? Well, smart dust, of course, isn't a new concept. It originated with DARPA back in the 90s. And it's general purpose computing, sensors, wireless networking, all bundled up into millimeter scale sensor nodes, drifting in the air currents, flecks of computing power settling on your skin, ingested, monitoring you inside and out.
This is magnetite, one of the most magnetic substances on Earth. As you can probably guess, it has a diverse range of uses, from fridge magnets to generating electricity in power plants. But what you probably wouldn't guess is that you have hundreds of millions of them inside your head. Scientists are still unsure what role, if any, these crystals play in the brain's function.
And that's what the nanotechnology is. Once consumed in the water or the food, the nanotechnology migrates to the bloodstream, to the brain, and begins to adhere to the neurotransmitters of a victim's brain, of the person's brain, and then through a process called transcranial brain stimulation, interfacing with streams of electromagnetic low-frequency waves, that nanotechnology begins to speak to and decode those neurotransmitters through a process called transcranial brain stimulation. And that's how they're able to, the supercomputers that are doing most of the torture and assassination, these CIA and DoD supercomputers, these exascale systems, that's how they're able to build a cognitive model of their victims' brains to eventually achieve direct behavioral control over their victims.
Right.
So, for that reason alone, we can say we've probably passed the point of no return.
In 1992, the first evidence of this mineral in the brain was published. A 2009 hypothesis proposed that magnetite plays a significant role in long-term memory. It suggests that cellular components of the brain communicate with each other through magnetic signals, with the magnetite particles acting as tiny antennas, simultaneously receiving information throughout the different parts of the brain. Magnetite also acts as an antenna for external electromagnetic fields, including the geomagnetic field of the Earth itself. And this is where things start to get interesting. An enormous body of research is emerging that shows substantive links between magnetic fields and cognitive function. Back in 1978, research physicist Dr. Robert C. Beck published preliminary research on the effects of extremely low-frequency magnetic fields on the moods of human subjects. ELF fields of 6.67 Hz, 6.26 Hz, and lower tend to produce symptoms of confusion, anxiety, depression, tension, fear, mild nausea, and headaches. On the other hand, fields of 7.8, 8.0, and 9.0 Hz produce anxiety-relieving and stress-reducing effects. They even mimic some meditative states. More recently, magnetic fields have been used in successful clinical practices for eliminating depression and bipolar disorder, with over 1,300 medical research papers published to date. The non-invasive treatment, known as repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, uses a wand-shaped gadget to zap away the effects of depression.
Basically, what they've done is they've weaponized neuroscience. Neuroscience is no longer just a field of medicine. It's crossed the threshold of medical science, and it's now a chief weapons platform used by the major intelligence agencies of the world. Mind control technologies are based off three things: neuroscience, psychology, and what is called satanic ritual abuse. And that's what they've done. They've weaponized neuroscience.
One of the newest developments is that nanoparticulate matter can be stabilized for distribution. We're aware of what nanoparticulate matter is. It's that matter which exists on a scale of 1 × 10⁻⁹. Very, very small. Smaller than a cell. And we can manufacture materials that have discrete properties that can be controlled by virtue of bioengineering and their physical chemistry. I can create small robotic units, controllable robotic units at the nanoscale, and that these too can be aerosolized to create a nanoswarm of biopenetrable materials that you cannot see, that can penetrate all but the most robust biochemical filters, that are able to integrate themselves through a variety of membranes, mucous membranes, and wherever, mouth, nose, ears, eyes, can be then uptaken into the vascular system to create clumping, can affect the vascular system of the brain, or can directly diffuse into the brain space, and these can be weaponized. And they can be done in such a level that their presence is almost impossible to detect, and as such, the attribution becomes exceedingly difficult to demonstrate. We've come to the precarious position of opening the proverbial can of worms of if, how, in what ways, to what extent, and when these techniques and technologies will be used in weaponized intelligence and national security agenda. Are civilian ethics even viable anymore? And if we engage military ethics, what military ethical principles will we engage? The brain is the current and future battle space.
But in the future, every square inch of every city will be alive with intelligence. Because every street and every building will have a network of microcomputers built right into them. Dr. Chris Piester calls it smart dust.
A smart dust particle, or MOTE, is a wireless sensor with sensing, computation, communication, and power in one package.
These all-in-one microcomputers will be small, very small. Tiny specks of computer smart dust will form a vast invisible network that can help manage the infrastructure of even the largest city.
Smart cities in the future will take this low power, inexpensive, small technology and basically distribute it everywhere.
These tiny computers record information about their surroundings, information they can send to other computers or to you. Smart dust on the tracks will monitor your commuter train so you know if it's running late. Potholes will be able to report themselves and warn your car, and you'll never have to wait for a radio traffic report again.
They're monitoring the flow of traffic and giving you alerts about what route is the right way to go to keep the traffic moving.
Bridges will get a coating of smart dust particles that can warn us when they detect stress fractures, helping avoid deadly collapses. But smart dust will also allow buildings and streets to recognize you and respond accordingly.
I think increasingly, the environment will respond to who we are and adapt in consequence.
The city will know where you are if you want it to.
Your workplace will know you. Smart dust at the entrance will boot up your computer. And smart dust embedded in the elevator doors will automatically ring your floor.
Smart dust is going to sense the environment and allow us to improve the way that we live our lives.
I've worked on projects for the CIA, Justice Department, Department of Defense.
Are there citizens of this country that are being abused with this technology?
Worse than abused, that's a light word. They're being tortured.
So the targeted individuals aren't crazy after all. With your background and what you know, can you give us a hint on what we ought to do?
No.
No. Is it too late?
I actually believe it's too late.
So what you're telling me, every one of us should be in fear of this because every one of us at some point will be targeted?
The technology's advanced that far.
There is a very real risk that you are going to become a full-blown 24/7 targeted individual. And this technology at that point, when it is nationwide, will be used by automated computer, supercomputer software programming that will manipulate the emotions and the behavior and the thoughts of everybody in the United States of America. And it can all be done remotely. It's very much like the microchip kind of tracking the New World Order, this entire, control grid that's supposed to be rolled out against the American people someday. And I'm here to tell you that it's already here. There isn't going to come a day where there's troops in the streets and tanks rolling down your neighborhood and riot gear and all this stuff. We might have isolated incidents like that. It might get like that every once in a while, but the true control grid is this technology, voice-to-skull, hive mind, behavior manipulation technology. And it can all be done remotely. It can be done simply by targeting you with a frequency, locking into the resonant frequency of your DNA and your mind, and in that manner completely track and trace and control you 24 hours a day.
5G. 5G is coming. We have people who have looked into this. One of our colleagues talked to somebody who is a contractor putting together on the job one of the new 5G towers, and he has been working in the industry for apparently many years, 3G, 4G. He says there are lots of equipment pieces that he's installing. He knows how to install them, but he has no idea and is not being told what they're for, what their use is, nothing. He says, I don't have any idea what they're doing, but it's really advanced stuff. So what do you know about 5G and how this may or may not be a platform to distribute some of the ELF, extreme low frequency, control mechanisms that are being used on people?
They do match up with the properties and necessary capabilities. They easily could be broadcasting across the country messages to people and causing them extreme pain. That's part of the whole world domination strategy. Control the population. from subconsciously to consciously.
5G, first and foremost, is densification. So it's significantly more transmitters in close proximity to the human, and it is also a sophisticated, illegal, unlawful transmitter. It's specific for battlefield interrogation systems, so sub-gigahertz. It allows the signal to travel through concrete brickwork with ease. It is extremely good at identifying targets and being able to lock onto targets. And not only that, it can specifically target you as an individual.
It's dependent upon timing and location, and we're talking about three-dimensional geolocation. But timing is more important because it's more difficult for people to understand. What I mean by timing is, location is rather simple, but timing is more complicated to understand. What I mean is that the stream of energy must run in sync with the brainwave signature of the victim, alpha, beta, delta, theta. So the correct phase, frequency, and amplitude of the stream of energy is crucial, absolutely crucial. For the correct modulation is absolutely crucial for their technology to be effective. Otherwise, the technology doesn't work.
The frequency that's being emitted by the device will have an effect on a geographical location, let's say downtown Seattle. And so what they can do is, within this general field, they can broadcast a frequency that affects human beings within that frequency field and can induce a general mood of, let's say, happiness or sadness, anger, agitation, peacefulness. And in this way, they can have an overall effect in the city. And I have seen this done, and it is remarkable how effective it is, because you will walk down the street of Seattle and literally see people all in a bad mood, all at the same time, and they do not know each other. And then you go over a block or two to a different office building, and you walk in, and the exact same thing's going on there. It's very, very concerning. So within that, then, that overall bubble or area of frequency where everybody, let's say, is in a bad mood, they can still inject what would be a individual specific frequency to the targeted individual themselves, let's say the homeless person in Seattle that's being experimented on 24 hours a day. So they will be under the influence of the general agitated mood or bad mood that everybody else is in, and then they can more further be manipulated by the frequency that's being directed solely at them. The radio frequencies, microwave signals, the entire spectrum of radio frequencies can be used within a certain range to produce all sorts of different effects. So the way it works is a device broadcasts a radio frequency, let's say at an individual, and that radio frequency will hook up with the resonant frequency of the individual's mind or body, or in this case DNA. And what happens is, once the resonant frequency is found in the targeted individual and the broadcast frequency matches up with that resonant frequency, those two frequencies interlock, and they can be thought of as one frequency or one energy. And what happens is, between the broadcast frequency and the individual that's receiving the broadcast frequency, once they are resonating together, a super highway of frequency along which information can be sent is created. And so you can think of it just like fiber optic cables that you use to send signals over the internet that connect people to the internet. It's the exact same thing, only a wireless application of that.
Rosaday was working with the CIA and exchanging technology and study data with the Russians back in the 60s and 70s and even further back, and he figured out scientifically, demonstratively, how non-ionizing radiation at various specific frequencies from microwaves or from other signals, how they could alter human and animal behavior. For instance, a simple 10 Hz wave could put someone into a stupor within a couple of minutes. Using neuroelectric devices that they developed by the 70s, they could put individuals or entire towns to sleep on command. They can aggravate people, they can alter their sexual preferences, they can delete their memories, they can turn on desire, they can turn on repulsion, and they could otherwise hijack someone's spontaneous and natural behavior. They could literally hijack your nervous system and your brain. And that was 30 or 40 years ago. Now things are very advanced, they're very precise, and they're very far along. There's discussions now at the Davos World Economic Forum that have broached the topic of mind reading and literal mind control. And these devices, the capability to do it is built into everything, every handheld unit, every laptop, mobile device that everyone's carrying around. And once things are fast enough with 5G, all bets are off. The constant ubiquitous connection with these next generation 5G towers. I mean, what else can you say? I don't want to add paranoia, I don't want to make people fearful, but basically, where can you run from this? Once this system is fully launched and up, it's going to be just like the Terminator Genesis system. It's going to be the rise of AI, and it's going to be like there's no looking back.
We must reject the notion that the 5G future will be the sole providence of urban areas. The 5G revolution will touch all corners of our country. We are the pioneers of a new spectrum frontier.
No one gave permission for this because most people don't fully understand what's happening or why it matters. They're going to click on little agreements on their cell phone for the different sites they visit, and they're going to have no idea how much is going to be taken from that. But it's clear that this is not a good bargain, and people need to be warned. They should try to oppose this in their local cities and where they can, and try to challenge these companies, because they don't want to face resistance, and they don't want a population that knows about the dangers and the risks of this technology.
In 1953, the Russians began to bombard the U.S. Embassy in Moscow with electromagnetic radiation in the microwave spectrum, but the fact was kept secret from the embassy employees. Dr. Henry Kissinger sent a secret memo giving hazard pay to embassy personnel in the 1970s. Before the attacks, the USSR had met with the US to try to head off an arms race in electromagnetic weapons, but were refused. In retaliation, they began microwaving the US Embassy. It is possible that the US government took advantage of the situation and used the embassy staff as microwave guinea pigs. The Department of Defense's Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA, set up a lab at Walter Reed Army Institute of Research and participated in Project Pandora. Scientists began zapping monkeys to study the biological effects of highly concentrated microwave frequencies.
Something else the 5G grid can do is it can see through walls, it can see through houses, it can see what you're carrying along the street. You can see if you're carrying money. It may be able to tell if you're carrying a weapon. And if you are carrying a weapon, it can disable you with a millimeter wave, or it can even perhaps send a signal to a drone and have you targeted from the air. All of this is capable through the 5G system. It's also possible to take control of vehicles with computers in them. It's an all-encompassing system. And this is not just being used for communication. This is being used for surveillance and control.
This is not just an incremental change. This is a big step up.
It's a sea change. An onslaught's not an improper word. It's a bombardment. So instead of a cell tower 1 mile or 2 miles from you and you still have cell phone service, we're going to have antennas every block, and some poor soul is going to have one mounted to utility pole maybe less than 20 meters from their home. So this kind of, invasive bombardment with this many antennas, I mean, just in 1 square mile, if you do the math, 1 per block and 16 blocks per mile, that's about 250 antennas per square mile. The millimeter wave is untested. Former FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler openly said that they don't plan to test.
We won't wait for the standards.
And then our appeal also addresses the fact that there's a plan to roll out 5G through satellites in low Earth orbit. So 20,000 satellites, which will cover every square foot of the planet with a 5G signal.
So this amazing set of missions aim to create a super low latency telecommunications network. And how are they going to do this? Not by launching just these 60 satellites, which, let's face it, is a damn amazing mission by itself, but by launching around 12,000 satellites in 3 sophisticated orbital shells around the world. No big deal, right? The better question might be, why is SpaceX attempting to create this network?
What this whole system is leading towards, folks, is complete digital control of everybody and a merging of human beings with AI. And when you look at Elon Musk and some of the stuff he's been putting out, he's saying that it is necessary for us to merge with AI. It's going to be the only way to save us against AI completely taking over. And he's saying this needs to be done through a neural net. And listen to this.
If you assume any rate of advancement in AI, we will be left behind by a lot.
That is Elon Musk, the inventor and entrepreneur behind such futuristic endeavors as Tesla, SpaceX, and Hyperloop. And as you heard, Elon Musk has AI, artificial intelligence, on his mind these days. He says AI machines could soon outsmart us all, and his philosophy is if we can't beat them, we should join them by implanting AI computers directly into our brains.
So, from a long-term existential standpoint, that's like the purpose of Neuralink, is to create a high bandwidth interface to the brain such that we can be symbiotic with AI. Because we have a bandwidth problem. You just can't communicate through your fingers, it's too slow. So I think if we can effectively merge with AI by improving that the neural link between your cortex and your digital extension of yourself, which already, like I said, already exists, just has a bandwidth issue.
Pay close attention to what he said there. What he said was that this interface already exists. It's just that they have to improve the bandwidth. They have bandwidth problems. So how might these bandwidth problems be improved?
Not just that 5G is faster than 4G and that's it. It has other features such as much lower latency. It also has higher capacity for bandwidth and higher capacity for number of devices.
Brain projects are underway all over the world, from the China Brain Project to the EU-led Human Brain Project and the Blue Brain Project in Switzerland. In the US, the Brain Initiative is on track to spend $4.5 billion for research through 2025. If we can replicate the brain's structure closely enough, we might stumble onto digital consciousness.
The United States' first exascale machine to drive breakthrough science and innovation at unprecedented scale.
The investment that the Department of Energy is making in this project is absolutely essential.
Brain science, literally giving people their lives back, saving lives.
So this supercomputer that's targeting the victim is actually a system of computers, of conscious computers with a will, intellect, and emotion of their own. Now, it's really not their own. It's the bioalgorithms which make up the bioalgorithms which make up the will, intellect, and emotion of those that they've copied and destroyed. Mind transfer, mind copying, whole brain emulation, etc., for the purposes of training, research, and development.
Believe it or not, it started with Franklin Delano Roosevelt when we worked on the census, the Social Security system, the CDC to track disease, the role we played with NASA in landing the man on the moon, and I liken what we're doing here today equivalent to that.
So this thing does what? I'm looking at the word in the description.
Right.
Exascale. What is that?
So exascale computing refers to any system that's capable of handling at least one exaflop. An exaflop is 1 quintillion floating point computations, or a flop. A flop is two 15-digit numbers being multiplied together. So that's their base here.
Those algorithms, those machine learning algorithms, the system then takes those algorithms and correlates communication and behavior data. When I say communication and behavior data, what I'm referring to is impulses and identifiers. Okay, and then that brain activity is then sampled, remotely measured, and then integrated back into RNA data for the purposes of creating a cognitive model of the victim's brain. So the victim is tied to this system of conscious computers. It's not just one computer. Okay. Remotely by way of this bidirectional stream of electromagnetic low frequency waves specifically tuned to the brainwave signature of the victim.
Exa is a big number. The universe is only half an exaseconds old. Exa is a big number. With 3 quintillion operations per second, Summit can simulate a human brain where each of the 100 billion neurons This model with 30 million instructions per second. Summit is fast.
How much of this is actually going to be used, despite what they tell us, for defense purposes?
So a lot of it, they are claiming outwardly that a lot of it's going to be used to test weapons and things like that.
Is that something we should be concerned about?
I think that's up to the American public for sure, but it's definitely being touted as something good for national security.
As many of the test subjects, so-called, the people who are being experimented on, or as within the program as they're called, a target, as many of them have already learned, one of the key means of covering up this program is to use the psychological profession to do so. Those who speak out about this issue are funneled to psychiatrists for evaluation. The psychiatrists are working with those who are running this program. In many cases, they are directly paid by them to render a diagnosis of schizophrenic, multiple personality disorder, delusional, paranoid, depressed, upon the test subjects, the targets, so that they will be discredited. So that if they talk out any further, or they ever start making any progress against this program, they are inherently discredited, because those who run this program will simply release the psychological files and claim that the person is mentally ill. This is a perfect way to cover up such a technology whose main feature and most popular feature, most well-known feature, is voice to skull, which induces sound within the cranial cavity of the test subject, of the target themselves, so that when that person goes to speak out about it, when they go to seek help from their fellow human beings, and their fellow human beings say, "What is it that's happening to you?" the target will then say, "I'm hearing voices inside my head." It's the result of voice-to-skull technology. It's a sophisticated microwave auditory effect. It's radio frequency signals that are being beamed at my fucking head that are causing me to hear sounds and voices inside my head. Obviously, if members of the general public are not aware of the existence of this technology, which many of them are not, most of them are not, then they will interpret that as concerning. They will feel concern for the target, and they will conclude that this person must be crazy. And as a result, they will recommend psychological evaluation for that person. You can see the way this is going to go, and the way it is going right now. As good people, helpless people that are being abused and tortured and enslaved and experimented upon in America today, American citizens cry out for help from their fellow Americans, and their fellow Americans say, "Why don't you take some Prozac? Because we think you're schizophrenic." When this is a highly technical program, all of the symptoms are induced by a technology that is so fucking sophisticated, it is horrifying beyond description.
And now we've got a motive. Controlling dissenters, controlling the world, controlling you and me.
Who are the controllers? I mean, is that our president? The Federal Reserve? No. So these are people within our government at a certain level making these decisions, and they're not necessarily our president or our elected officials. That's exactly right. Wow. That makes it even more difficult because they can't be removed. They can't be removed. They're difficult to find.
Lionel, what is the history of the conspiracy theory in terms of it being almost weaponized?
It's precisely the case. In 1967, the CIA, in a memo, actually used the term, suggested that the term conspiracy theory be used in over 250 of the CIA pretty much run and controlled media outlets to weaponize, to be weaponized, but also to throw off people who were questioning at that particular time the Warren Commission. So what we're saying is question more, where have I heard that? And also be apprised and be aware of how these terms are still being used today to basically turn off inquiry. And people, dare I say, and fear, young people in particular, are being habituated to this idea that all you have to do is merely say it's a conspiracy theory and all discussion ends.